handouts this time around. I'm going to do that first.
Thank you.
That's it. Our organization is called HAMS. It's an acronym. It stands for Harm Reduction, Abstinence from Alcohol, Moderation, and Support. It's a support group for people who want to make any positive change in their drinking habits, from reduced drinking to safer drinking to quitting altogether. And this is our book, which you can get from Amazon or any bookstore, How to Change Your Drinking. And our talk is going to be about how to choose your alcohol harm reduction goal, which is the second element of our program. We have elements because we don't, instead of steps, because you can do them in any order, choose the ones you want to do. You don't have to do them all, you don't have to do any of them. Pick the one you like, do that one. And this topic of choosing an alcohol harm reduction goal is one that I'm really interested in. And I love everyone's feedback. If you want to send me emails, if you have good ideas about this, I'm going to do one little anecdote. A person on our online support group was choosing to drink again after a long period of abstinence. We've had quite a few people that do this successfully. I was apprehensive. I was feeling she was not going to be successful, and she was not successful. And she kind of, at the end, accused us of enabling her. And, I really wanted to develop better tools to help people choose the goal that's going to fit them best. Some people can drink again successfully after they've been abstaining. Some don't do so well. Some find abstinence is the best choice. Let's start this in. There's some possible goals. You can choose to be a safer drinker without reducing any amounts. That one example of that would be to stop drinking and driving. Still drink the same amount as you did before, but not drink and drive anymore. Being safer, you can choose to reduce your amounts without hitting the moderate goals. You can choose to be a moderate drinker. You can choose to quit completely. I also included baby stepping. Some people want to make their changes a little bit at a time. They're not ready to make the big change yet. And they do know that they want to make a bigger change, but they're not ready. They want to start with a little one. And what is the difference between moderate drinking and reduced drinking? Usually moderate drinking is defined like the NIAAA does. For men, it's a limit of 14 standard drinks per week, no more than 14 per week, no more than 4 per day. For women, it's no more than 3 per day, no more than 7 per week. And standard drinks have 14 grams of ethanol. It's a 1.5 ounce shot of 40 proof alcohol, 1 12 ounce beer, a 5 ounce glass of wine at 12%. Reduced drinking, as I said, can be any reduction. If a person's drinking 20 drinks a day and they go to 10 drinks a day, that's not moderate drinking, but it is a reduction and it is a good goal. Any positive change is a good goal. That's a good way to look at harm reduction. And look at some data from Bill Miller's behavioral self-control training studies. And this was some really interesting stuff that he looked at. When Miller was defining moderate drinking, he was talking actually not about numbers of drinks, but of numbers of consequences, one or fewer consequences that constituted moderate drinking, 2 or more constituted either a harm reduction outcome or an unchanged outcome. We're going to look at that a little more. So the moderate drinking outcome, and Miller's study included people with a diagnosis of alcohol abuse and also people with a diagnosis of alcohol dependence. It was a long-term follow-up period, 3.5 years. This is 4 groups combined that he studied. So the shortest period of follow-up was 3.5 years, and the longest period of follow-up was 8 years. So it's not just a couple months. And these are the outcomes that we had. And this is for all 99 subjects combined from the 4 different studies he was looking at. And we got 14 people had moderate drinking outcomes, 23 quit drinking, harm reduction outcomes, 22 people, unchanged, 30 people. Those that got worse, just 5 people, and 5 people died. So the normal view we have of alcoholism is a progressive disease that only gets worse. Actually, after this behavioral self-control intervention, we didn't see that at all, and there's other evidence to suggest that the normal outcome is for people to get better, and the people get worse is actually a rare outcome. These are the drinking levels that he found. He defined things in terms of consequences, but then he measured drinking levels afterwards and the average drinks. Well, the abstinent people had 0 drinks. There was one person in the abstinent category that had like 1 drinking day out of a year or something like that. He said that's really abstinent. So the moderate people had 9.8 drinks on the average per week, 13.6 for the harm reduction or improved group, and the unremitted or deteriorated, the people that stayed the same or got worse, were 42.6 drinks per week on average. Interesting thing, diagnosis did not determine the outcome. There were just as many people with a diagnosis of alcohol dependence that became moderate drinkers as there were with the diagnosis of alcohol abuse. So I've heard a lot of people, professionals say, well, if you're an abuser, maybe you can moderate, but if you have dependence, you can't, but the data says that's not true. Even people with alcohol dependence, lots of them moderate. Many of them also find that quitting is their best choice. And it's really up to the individual. Also, with harm reduction outcomes, we saw the same thing, just as many people with alcohol abuse had harm reduction outcomes as did people with alcohol dependence. So there was no statistical significant difference between the groups. And this is what it looks like when you look at the chart. I mean, it actually looks like the abusers had a lot fewer moderate people, but when you actually run the numbers and do the stats, that was not a significant outcome. So this really doesn't tell us anything unless we get a really much bigger group and measure it. Significant factors in outcome. AA attendance, successful moderate drinkers were significantly less likely to have attended AA. People who rejected the label of alcoholic were significantly more likely to achieve moderation. And severity of alcohol dependence, this was an interesting one. And Miller was really looking at the moderate drinking outcomes and the abstinence outcomes. He didn't really like the harm reduction outcomes so much, and at the end of one of his papers, he said, how could we make these improved people become abstinent? That was kind of his goal. I kind of like the harm reduction outcomes, I say, because, better is better. If you get better, it's a good thing. So, severity of alcohol dependence, people who were severely alcohol dependent were significantly less likely to achieve the moderate goal. But they were just as likely to get a harm reduction goal or to get an abstinence goal. So people with severe dependence, if they're not succeeding at quitting, then choosing a harm reduction route is a reasonable goal for these people. The NESARC study also gave us some interesting results. It was a 20-year follow-up of people who had alcohol dependence, and we found that about half recovered by quitting completely and about half recovered by moderating. And one more thing we found from NESARC was that 3/4 of all people with alcohol dependence recovered, and 3/4 of those who recovered did it on their own, without treatment, without AA, without anything. Okay, now we're going to get to choosing a goal. This is some of the evidence that came before about, who fits what goal. People with really severe dependence probably won't do well at moderation. But safer drinking and reduced drinking compared to quitting, usually there's not so much contradiction between safer drinking and reduced drinking. People don't really say, oh, should I be a safer drinker or should I be a reduced drinker? I have a terrible conflict, and not so much. These kind of go hand in hand. It's much more people have the struggle, should I quit or should I try to control this? What's going to work better? This is where the dichotomy tends to come in. We say if people have been abstinent from alcohol for 6 months or more, be very careful before you try controlled drinking. I mean, do the benefits of drinking, again, actually outweigh the risks? And looking at possible goals again, I mean, abstinence from alcohol is one, moderate drinking is one. Harm reduction in the narrow sense of the word, we can look at safer drinking or reduced drinking or baby stepping as one as possible outcomes. Harm reduction in the broad sense, of course, includes everything that reduces harm, including abstinence and moderation, but it's also useful sometimes to use the term in the more narrow sense to separate it out from the other things. So here's some possible scenarios for people who are going to make a change. Current abstainers, people who are currently drinking who want to quit. Current drinkers who want to be safer or cut back, or current drinkers who are unable or who have no desire to quit. These are possible points of contact with making your decision for your change goal. For current abstainers, once again, we say if you've been successfully abstaining from alcohol, eliminated alcohol-related harms in your life, we strongly urge you to consider remaining abstinent. There is no magic bullet to ensure that people who drink again will never incur alcohol-related harms. So we can't teach everybody, you can drink all you want, never have a problem again. We don't have that godlike ability. It'd be nice if we did. However, if you are determined to try drinking again, no matter what, then it is probably safer to do so within a harm reduction format, perhaps with the support of a harm reduction group. People who appear most likely to succeed with drinking again are those whose, for example, drug of choice was something other than alcohol. If you were a moderate drinker, but you had a big heroin habit, and you kicked the heroin, you went to your treatment, they told you to stop everything. A lot of people, that were moderate drinkers when they were shooting heroin, when they make the whole lifestyle change, they can go back and be moderate drinkers again. If you try to directly substitute alcohol for the heroin high and get as drunk as possible, you're probably going to have alcohol-related problems. People with little exposure to AA are more likely to succeed with drinking again. People who had a spate of heavy drinking when they were young and then got abstinent for a while, they were probably just sowing some wild oats, so very likely they have a better chance of drinking again. Those who drink heavily in response to a certain life crisis, like loss of a job, depression, certain things, situational, they also have a good chance of succeeding at drinking again. And people who appear less likely to succeed, people with lots of exposure to AA, those with really long-term chronic alcohol-related problems, many negative consequences, and those whose drug of choice was alcohol and had lots of consequences, didn't really do any other drugs much to speak of. And for current drinkers, if you decide that you want to quit completely, go for it. We're totally in favor of that. That's a great harm reduction goal. And if you want to abstain but you're not succeeding, you can get there eventually probably. But on the way, first you want to forgive yourself. Don't beat yourself up, make yourself feel like a failure. Tell yourself, I am a horrible person because I drank again. I'm so miserable, I have to drink some more to drown out my feelings of misery. That's Alan Marlatt studied that a lot. He called it the abstinence violation effect. So if you can forgive yourself, realize that it takes time to make a change, some slip-ups are natural, you can get to your goal with a lot less consequences and negative waves on the way there. We recommend people to have a plan B in place when you start abstaining. So you already decided, well, if I do slip up and drink again, okay, I have my plan. I'm going to call a taxi to take me to the bar. I'm going to have a taxi take me back. So I'm not going to drink and drive, or various things you can plan to stay safe and not have too many negative consequences if you do have a slip. So be prepared. And try not to drink impulsively on the spur of the moment. So if you get an urge to drink, we recommend people try to stop and think, and at least for 5 minutes make a plan. How are you going to drink? Don't just run in to the bar, buy the drink. Take 5 minutes. Say, okay, how can I do this safely? For current drinkers with no desire to abstain, we recommend that they make a plan to be safe and to control quantities or to control quantities, depending on what their goal is. It's perfectly all right in our organization to say, I don't want to change my quantities, I want to change my safety. That's good. And we recommend people to track their risks or to track their quantities depending on what their goal is. And a drinking goal is always a very personal choice. Different people have very different values, different lifestyles, different beliefs, different personal circumstances, jobs, family, spouses. We also tell people it's okay to quit for someone else if you want to. I mean, if your wife is really upset because you drink a lot and you want to get along with your wife, it's like, maybe this is good enough motivation for me. As I said, because different people are very different, even some very light drinkers who just feel that alcohol shouldn't be a part of my life anymore. I don't like it anymore. Quitting's fine. You don't have to continue to drink just because you're already moderate. You can do what you want. We support people in their own choices and their own goals. And even if you're a very heavy drinker, it's okay to choose a harm reduction goal. Particularly if your attempts to quit have backfired and led you to huge relapses with worse consequences, then we suggest, for now, right now, think about being safe. Think about what you can do to control your drinking. And, here's a comparison I wanted to make. We don't tell people who are shooting heroin, okay, we will give you clean needles only if you're a moderate heroin user, only if you shoot on the weekends. But if you're going to be addicted to heroin, you can't have any clean needles because you're bad because you're addicted. But we've kind of taken that approach with alcohol and said, well, if your alcohol problem isn't too bad, then you can try to moderate. But if you're a heavier drinker, you're not allowed to try to reduce the harm. You have to be abstinent or else. And I really think we can learn a lot from each other. People, working with needle exchange, people working with alcohol. I've really seen this a lot at this conference. People are really interchanging a lot of stuff. And the frontline workers and the scholars, everybody's talking and it's really feeding into each other. I think it's really great. Repeating myself, harm reduction is not a magic bullet to allow everyone to drink alcohol with no consequences. We are ultimately responsible for our own choices. So no program can enable people to drink. And for about half of heavy drinkers, their best option for reduction of harm is quitting completely. So we totally favor that for the people who choose it. And for everyone, regardless, we recommend they track, they evaluate their progress. They might like to post to a support group online or talk about it in a live group or write it out in a journal. If one goal doesn't work, try switching to another. Try baby stepping. Don't feel shame because shame will just set you back. Some tools you can use to help you make your choice: a cost-benefit analysis. Write out the pros and cons of your current habits. Write out the pros and cons of the change you want to make. Short alcohol dependence data questionnaire. We put a copy on our website. This can help you evaluate the severity of your drinking. So you might not find that moderation works so well if you're very severe, and so you might want to opt for a harm reduction goal. You might want to opt for an abstinence goal. And I think stories about how people change and what goal they chose can be really helpful. I've included those on the handout. They're not in the PowerPoint because it's way too long. But and the stories are online and in our book. And then looking at if you're ready, willing, or able for change. If you can't decide if your best goal is controlled drinking or quitting, say do the CBA, use the severity of alcohol dependence, and again, if you're highly alcohol dependent, maybe a harm reduction goal is best, or maybe an abstinence goal is best, and more doable than moderate drinking. And for whatever goal you're choosing, check out if you're ready, willing, and able to do it. And it's a good exercise to get out a pencil and paper, write down ways that you can increase your readiness, willingness, or ability to accomplish your chosen goal. And thank you.